Hi, welcome back to the Tori Nook Talk Show, where we go beyond the title and talk about what's really shifting in real life, the behind the scenes changes, the defining moments, and the way intention, synchronicity, faith, and intuition can guide us to making more aligned decisions in our life, both personally and professionally. I had the honor of meeting Yonah Weiss back in September at the CRE Summit that Ken Ashley has done an amazing job putting it on. It was my first year, and I had the pleasure of meeting Yonah, and he's an amazing man. He is the cost segregation king. If you need to know anything about cost segregation, he's the PhD expert in it. He's a powerhouse with property owners' tax savings as a director at Madison Specs, a national cost segregation leader. He has assisted clients in saving over $1 billion on taxes through cost segregation. He has a background in teaching and a passion for real estate and also helping others. He's a real estate investor himself, and he's also the host of the top podcast called Weiss Advice. And he's also very active on social media and LinkedIn and helps many people promote their businesses on Sundays. Definitely follow him and check him out there. And Yonah, I am very happy to have you here on the Tori Nook Talk Show.
I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited. You're my first guest ever to be talking about cost segregation, so we've got a lot to dive into. I wanted to know, like, before you got into cost segregation and tax strategy, what's the part of your story that explains why you even chose that path? And what were you doing even before that?
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, I was a teacher for about
Mhm.
15 years. And really, my background and my passion really has just been in education forever, to the point where I actually had my mother was a teacher, my
Oh,
grandparents were teachers. It was like my grandmother was like, "Oh, you're going into the family business."
where did you teach?
And yeah, and I really had no direction in terms of finance or into business or anything like that, and had gotten myself, unfortunately, into a bit of a pickle in terms of finances, just with student debt and a growing family. Thank God we had, unfortunately, a pretty major health crisis in our immediate family a little over 10 years ago. And at that point, I was like, I need to make some like major choices, some changes, do something else. And that's when I started looking around like, hey, what else can I do besides teaching? And real estate kept coming up in conversation with friends of mine. I got my broker's license at that point, just
Okay.
getting my feet in the water. And I started with a good friend of mine doing commercial mortgages. And I just really learning from him, apprenticing, learning everything there was to know about the commercial real estate industry. Literally sat with him in his office for 5 days a week for like
Okay.
9 months,
Yeah.
and learned everything about underwriting, about doing cold calls and networking, and you name it, all the acronyms that come with commercial real estate, right? And I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years or so, until I was approached about this company, Madison. They were looking for someone in the business development, and I really had no idea at that point what cost segregation was.
A lot of
And
people don't. And we're
right,
going to talk
exactly.
about what that definition is next.
Exactly. And that was really, to my pleasant surprise, like almost every single person I spoke to who had been, in my network over the prior 2 years in doing real estate,
Right.
almost nobody had even heard of cost seg. So I was like, okay, this is a little bit of a light bulb moment. What happened was when I had a tutor of mine, not a tutor, a friend of mine who was really a mentor. He had been extremely successful real estate developer. I asked him, I was like, hey, you heard of this cost seg stuff? He's like, oh yeah, we use Madison for all our cost segs. And I was like, at that point, it was a light bulb. It was like, okay, 99% of the people I speak to have no idea what it is. The one person who happens to be the most successful real estate investor I know
Hmm.
knows about it, utilizes it, and says this company's great. Like, I think I'm just going to dive in.
Right.
And I was like, the light bulb was, it's education. It's literally just a lack of knowledge, because he said it's a no brainer and no one else even knew what it was. So, like, there was really just this huge knowledge gap. And I said to myself, well, I'm a teacher really at heart. Like, that's really what I love to do. So let's see if we can make a difference here. and start just educating and spreading the word. And that's when I started going on podcasts, using social media,
Mhm.
webinars, etc. And that's really the springboard of how I got into real estate and cost seg.
Interesting. So how many years did you teach?
About 15
Wow.
altogether prior
So
to that.
how old
Yeah.
were you then when you started working for your friend who had the mortgage company?
Yeah, about 35. So I'm 45
Okay.
now. You can
Okay.
tell from all the white beards. Maybe I'm a little older, but yeah,
Gotcha. So that's interesting. So you did a pretty big life pivot at 35,
sure.
going from what grade did you teach when you were teaching school?
Well, I was actually teaching all different levels throughout
Okay.
my that time period, but at that time I was doing really like collegiate and like post collegiate
Got it.
studies. Yeah,
Okay. So, you're doing something you're passionate about. You then realize you're building a family, you want to make some more money, you step into the world of real estate and mortgage industry. You're there for 2 years, and after I don't how many mortgages did you do in 2 years?
I mean we underwrote a lot. How many actually closed?
Which
Very
means
few
you dealt
actually
with a
closed.
lot of people, though, and the fact that
Yeah,
in 2 years, you're doing dozens upon dozens of mortgages, not one person, just one I'm sorry, let back up. One person only knew about cost
yeah,
segregation is wild to me. And I
crazy.
can
Yeah.
see why it was a wild eye opener to you too. I personally never knew about it. And, I'm just a couple years older than you. I didn't even know about it until I was 8 years into the business as a broker. And again, the only reason I knew is because someone like you who's advertising their business, calling you, sending you an email. And I'm like, what is this?
What is this thing, right?
Right. And again, I was thinking to myself, well, why is an accountant? And let's dive into that. Why isn't an accountant not doing this and telling you about it? That you're, paying to do all your stuff every year.
Yeah, well, it's amazing, and hopefully we'll get into describe what cost seg is a little bit. But just to preface, like why it's an engineering study of a property that accelerates depreciation. So most accountants are not proactive. Let's just put it out there. Most accountants are just there. They're plugging in numbers, and that's pretty much it. You send them your income, you send them all your receipts and everything like that. They punch in the numbers, and then they fill out the forms. A real proactive tax advisor or someone who is looking out for your best interest is going to know about these strategies like 1031 exchanges and cost segregation and investing through your retirement accounts and all kinds of things
Mhm,
like that,
mhm.
because they want you to pay less tax. And
Right,
having more deductions, having more ways to defer taxes, these are all strategies like cost segregation that can you know on a major way reduce your taxable income. And like many of my clients, pay zero income tax every year, even though they're making millions of dollars,
right.
which is like a perplexity for a lot of people to
Mhm,
realize, like, how can it be? How can you be making all this money and paying no taxes? It's like using strategies like this.
right. Well, give me your definition of cost segregation, the definition, and then let's talk about um, the monies that you're saving people, because I think people don't believe it. That's
Yeah.
true. We know it's true being in the industry, but I think from the public and passive investors that they're in the real estate, but they might be doctors or some other profession. Sometimes it's hard for them to believe like it's too good to be true.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, it is too good to be true in certain ways, but no, it's real, and that's the point. So, cost seg, what is it? It's an advanced form of depreciation. That's really it. And depreciation is an income tax deduction that you get when you buy a property. It doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial, as long as it's not your primary residence. The IRS allows you to take a deduction called depreciation. Now, it doesn't mean that your property is actually going down in value. Okay, it's a borrowed term. What it means is that because you bought this property, now based on that purchase price, we can take a small deduction every single year,
Hmm.
which is for residential, it's spread out over a 27.5 year period, for commercial over a 39-year period. And basically, you're taking this small deduction every single year of the value of the property as if it were going down in value. Okay, that's depreciation deduction. What cost seg does is it comes in and says there are certain components in the property that actually depreciate faster than those 27 or 39 years on a 5 or a 15-year schedule, or even on a 1 year. And what we do is through, like, as I mentioned, through an engineering study or report of a property, looking at every individual component, saying, hey, the carpeting or the appliances and the fixtures depreciate on this 5-year schedule. We're going to take the value of those components,
Mm-hmm.
depreciate them faster, essentially giving you a bigger tax deduction during the earlier years of ownership. So think of it like a cash flow mechanism. I have these potential deductions that I may never see, right? So instead of taking a little bit every year, I can take a lump sum in the
Right.
first year, and that's going to reduce my taxable income and be able to, use that money to reinvest.
When was the moment when you started diving head on into the cost segregation? Since it was this is now the third industry you're going into, right?
You're
From
right.
teaching mortgage banker to cost segregation, that you realized, whoa, like this can change people's lives, because it's a ton, as we know, a lot of money that you can
Yeah.
save. Like
Yeah.
what year?
It was immediately.
It was an immediate. Okay.
It was immediately. Yeah, literally. Like I said, I didn't know what Consig was. I went in, I got hired by this company, and immediately during the training, meeting the team and,
Mhm.
going over, what they do on a day to day, and seeing, samples and sitting
Mhm.
in on, listening in on calls and things like that. I saw literally immediately the incredible potential of this, and the people that were saving millions of dollars. And it wasn't until really I was actually in the midst of it, like calling people and meeting potential clients, seeing their faces in the reaction to, wait a second, you're telling me that I pay you a few $1,000s or whatever the cost of the study is, and I'm going to save like $300,000 on my taxes. Like, that doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. And it
Right.
doesn't for a lot of people, but it's like, it's incredible to see that, and literally life changing for a lot of people. I mean, I have clients from big to small, from REITs, who are,
Mhm.
$1 billion corporations,
Right.
to individual mom and pops, individuals who have like
Right.
one single family house.
Right.
And you see those individuals, the
Mhm.
literally, like, I can put an extra $50,000 in my pocket this year. Like, that's
Right.
huge.
It is huge. I mean, and that's another thing I was asked, like, what's the pattern that you see people who actively implement these strategies? Um, what do they keep buying more real estate? Do they divest these monies into other business? Like, what are they mostly doing once they see these dollar signs adding up?
Right. I mean, you can really do anything with it, but the truth of the matter is, most of my clients, I'd say the vast majority, are real estate investors, which means their goal is to scale. Their goal is to buy more properties when available. Obviously, market depending, great deals, but they're going to reinvest that money. They're not going to sit around and just pocket it, or
Right.
buy fancy cars or anything like that.
Yeah.
They're actually going to use that to grow their wealth, and that's the incredible thing. As I mentioned, it's a strategy. It's a cash
Mhm.
flow mechanism allowing you to grow your
Mhm.
wealth at a faster rate, because taxes are the biggest, right, expense that any individual or business has. So if you can eliminate or reduce significantly that
Oh, yeah.
expense, you can grow much faster.
Right. Right. What do with I wanted to shift back, like you starting at 35 years old in cost segregation, that was only 10 years ago. So social media was not like it is today. It was
Right.
there, I mean,
Sure.
obviously, but it isn't like it was today. Like, how did you really build your business to get going? Because it's easier now, obviously, in social media because so many people are on it, but
Right.
it wasn't so much 10 years ago.
Not
Were
at
you
all. And I had
selling?
zero.
What were you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. I had zero social media presence
Yeah.
10 years ago. I had a LinkedIn account, like pretty
Mhm.
much,
Like
everyone
everyone.
did. And you remember, like, you connect with your people you went to college with or whatever, and you had like 103, friends or connections.
Right. Believe me, I
And
was shocked when I saw I've been a member since 2007. I'm like, really?
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And
A couple
I was
years
like, and so I had opened up LinkedIn by accident one day.
ago.
Uh, Not really by accident. I'll tell you the story really. I
Love to
was
hear
doing
how you built up your social media presence, because you got a lot of competitors out there, but you're the guy that everyone knows.
right. So at that time, like I said, had zero social media presence. I was doing cold calls, all right, at the very
Mhm.
beginning, just getting trained in, just, working the system a little bit.
Yeah.
And when I hate cold calling,
I
okay,
do too.
and I
I do
always
too.
have,
Me
I
too.
always have. But my strategy for cold calling was always to try to make it more of a warm call, in that if I can do research about the person before I call them,
Yeah.
it's a much more, real conversation. I can
Right.
actually add value to them instead of just randomly calling someone. So what I would do is just Google the person's name,
Okay.
okay? See, I had a phone number, right? Maybe had a company name and the person's name, and so I would Google it, verify, okay, this is the person. Inevitably, LinkedIn would come up as the first result, or the first couple results on Google every single time.
That's
And
true.
so I would, just click LinkedIn and see, okay, they're in this city that matches the area code. Okay, this is the guy, has the same company name. Okay, it's real estate. Okay, this is the person. Now I know who I'm talking to. And that
Right.
happened a few times. And I
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I keep like showing up on LinkedIn. Let me like see what else is here. I clicked like the home page or the news feed or whatever it was. And for the first time, I saw like videos, and I saw, people talking about business and about, whatever it was, marketing and things like that. And I was like, wait a second, this isn't what I remember LinkedIn, right? It was like these stuffy kind of articles that you saw coming up, or, suggesting you to,
Yeah.
would
Sorry
you
about
like
that.
to recommend, Cynthia for, personal development or something, like, right. It would like tell you all these things. I saw for the first time, there was social interactions, and there was this social media thing. Again, this was LinkedIn, 10 years ago, and Microsoft had recently bought LinkedIn. And so it had started to change into, rivaling Facebook a little bit, but still that business component to it. So I got fascinated by it. I immediately, I found, just looking through the newsfeed, found like people in my network, and other people in real estate, and started connecting with all kinds of people. I saw someone doing this, what you call a 30-day LinkedIn challenge, and I was like very interested in it. And they're like, did like a little video of them talking like, I have to post for 30 days, and today I'm going to talk about cold calling, or today I'm going to talk about,
Mhm.
marketing or networking, whatever it was. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I found that third 30-day challenge. It no longer exists, but it was like this thing back then. And it actually, there were these marketing experts who had put together literally like a game plan of
Mm.
how to post, teaching you all kinds of things. And every single day for that 30 days, you would get like a lesson about
Right.
LinkedIn, and you
Okay.
would get certain, ways to post, like whether it be a video, whether it be long form content, whether it be, whatever it was at that time. And it was like, if you do this for 30 days, you will then start to see major results. So I did. I was like, hey, let's do it. Why not?
Hey, why
I
not?
had nothing to lose. And
Right.
that's really where I got started on LinkedIn. During that 30-day challenge, I grew my, connections to over 500. I had, 500 plus,
Right.
at that time. And then I was
Right.
like, wow, this is amazing. And then I got invited to be on my first podcast. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know this was a thing. Right. And it snowballed from there.
Really? So what year did you get on your podcast? Was it like 2018 or?
It was 2017. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even start listening. You're gonna laugh. I never even started listening to podcasts till 2018. Isn't that wild?
No, it's not wild, because I mean, it was not that as popular as it is
No,
today, for sure.
no. Yeah. How many podcasts have you been on now? Because I noticed scrolling, there's a lot.
So I lost count at a certain point, but truthfully, I've been a guest on over 500 podcasts.
Wow.
I've been, and I host my own podcast, which we're close to 500 interviewed episodes as well. So been
Oh,
quite a
nice.
bit.
Let's switch into that. Let's talk about your podcast. When did you start your Weiss Advice? What
So
year
I
did you do that?
launched it in 2020,
Okay.
basically like right after COVID. But I had actually wanted to launch it for about a year before I actually made the official
Yeah,
launch,
that makes
because
sense.
I had been a guest on podcast at that point, like,
Mhm.
tons of podcasts, and I just loved the conversation, and I also loved the component of, what we're doing here, right, Tori? Yeah, we met in Palm Springs last year,
Great.
but here we're actually having a conversation much longer. after this, we're going to be much closer in terms of connection, in terms of, okay, I know you a little better, you know me a lot better because I'm talking more, right?
Right?
But we have that solid connection, and that to me, through that podcast medium, besides for the value, hopefully we're adding to the listeners, it was
Right.
that connection with the host that I was getting through being a guest that I
Mhm.
loved, and I wanted to impart that on others as well. And so I wanted to give that opportunity to people and interview people on my podcast. And to this day, I'd say 90% of the guests who have been on my podcast are actually constant clients of mine. So successful real estate investors, but I want to further that connection, give them an opportunity to share their story, and again, further that connection. So that to me is one of the biggest benefits of this medium.
Right. And I mean, that is amazing that 450 of those guests are your clients in a 10-year time span. Think about this. Like, I mean, that's a big number with how you built up, just pretty much basing it off starting with cold calls, then LinkedIn, and going on your first podcast, getting out there. It's quite amazing how
It's awesome.
quickly you really kicked up. It's kind of one of those things in life where it's, even if you didn't pray for it, my gosh, like,
Yeah,
talk about faith and getting things kicked up in a fast way. It's amazing. And it just goes to show, like, you're meant to do this. I
thank you.
think,
Well,
because I don't know too many people in doing what you do that are at the level that you're at, really.
yeah, well, thank
It's
you.
a
I appreciate
blessing.
that.
What's the biggest, like, aha you've had from hosting? Because I know you really enjoy going on podcasts because, they're fun. Everyone has different things to talk about. They all have different questions, and the conversations are always totally different. Um, but what's the big aha, like, say, from like a guest that you were interviewing that really shifted, say, even maybe your perspective in business, or what you're even doing for a living?
Well, I actually get a lot because some of my guests are just incredible, just fascinating
Right,
people. Some of the most successful people that I have the pleasure of knowing,
right,
and I would say, learning from their stories, because most of the people that I interview, like I said, are real estate investors, but most of them did not start out in real estate. I'd say the
right.
majority of them started out in another business or another industry
Mhm.
or with a W-2 or whatever, and
Right.
making that shift and,
Mhm.
showing how you can actually build something and build and it was, I relate to that because obviously that's something that I did
Mhm.
personally,
Right.
but seeing other people and being so much more successful. But one of the biggest things that to answer your question specifically, one of the biggest paradigm shifts that I had was um, this book, Who Not How,
I
that
love that
kept,
book.
yeah, it kept coming a few years ago, like every other guest on my show, because I
Really?
ask a question at the end, like, what's a book that's given you a paradigm shift? Rich Dad Poor Dad was like, the standard answer for a lot of people. And it was funny. I
I
actually
think
did
we've all
like
read
a,
it. Yeah,
yeah, everyone's read it and it's a huge, mind shift, whatever.
it
But a
is.
few years ago, maybe it was like 2022, Who Not How kept coming up. Like every other guest was like, Who Not How? It's like, what is this
Interesting
book?
synchronicity. Yeah.
Right. And there was a pattern. So obviously, I put everyone on my book list and I try to, get the audiobook because it's very difficult. I have a huge list, obviously, now after
Me too.
450 episodes. Right.
Me too. Yeah.
I was grateful when everyone would say who not reach that poor dad because I'm like, okay, I don't need
Yeah.
another book on my list, right? But
Right.
so I checked it out, I got it immediately, and I was
Okay.
blown away. And that was probably for me the biggest paradigm shift, because that what that book is about, Who Not How, for our listeners who may not be familiar, it's
Yeah. Let's
just
talk.
about focusing on the things that you do well, and everything else hand off to someone else.
Yep.
And it's basically delegating and allowing yourself to grow and thrive, and not being bogged down by the minutia of things that you really don't like doing anyways. And to me, that was like, wow, like, because I was doing a lot. And so at that point, like, I brought on an assistant like shortly after that. And now I've
You
been
had not
through.
outsourced anybody at that point, is what you learned, is you were probably doing your own podcast. You were probably doing your own social media. You didn't have an assist. Like, whose did you hire from this
Yeah,
epiphany?
so we had had prior to that, the funny thing is I knew it, but I didn't know it because I had the reason that I didn't launch my podcast originally was because I couldn't figure out or didn't want to like spend the time doing
Yeah.
all the back work.
It's a
So
lot
I
of
hired
work.
a company. I hired
Yeah.
a company to take care of all that. So I knew like, okay, yeah, tune it out, right? But I didn't know it because I didn't internalize it totally in my whole business.
Right.
And at that point, we have a whole team. Madison is a big company. So I have a whole team like in the background. We have the CPAs and the engineers and all the things like
Mhm.
that. But me personally, I was sitting on email, and calls like all day long. And
Right.
so at that point, we hired someone to just take care of my inbox, right? And
Great.
just basically filter
Mhm.
out, half the things that I didn't even need to see. And answer simple questions that, needed simple answers.
Right.
And that freed up hours of my day. It's
Oh yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. No, I more people, that's the thing is, I think a lot of successful people, they are a little bit of control freaks. I'm a
Yes.
recovered one. I'm totally like, I know, control freak anonymous over here. But, and now I have more, I always say I have more help than ever. And it really helps you to thrive in what you're doing. And it also allows you to do other things and free up the time. Because when I was in my most intense time in my career, I would have never had time to get into social media or doing podcasting because I was taking on too much with just one assistant, right? Now like you, I mean, you have to have like a whole village behind you to
Yeah.
really get going. But what's nice is at least the money's come in order to afford to do that. And I think
Exactly.
it's just like letting one piece of control go, you'll see how the snowball effect will happen. will
Right. But
happen.
people don't realize that, right?
Right.
When you're in control, you think I have to do everything and I have to manage everything. And the truth of the matter is, you end up making so much more money
Right.
because you have a team helping you and you're freeing up your time to focus on those actions that are more profitable. And
Right.
so it's like, we hold ourselves back,
Hmm.
and we're limiting ourselves. And so, yeah, that was for me probably the biggest like mindset, the biggest like paradigm shift that I had through
For
the
sure.
podcast.
Right. Because I mean, from like a default mode, I think we all overwork or say we over prepare, waste time doing that. I realize, you've got to just get to the point. Um, and it costs you. It costs you money. That's like a big. I mean, I don't know. What do you think your biggest? Like, I was going to ask you, what is your biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your career, just alone, whether it's just cost segregation or anything along the way that
Biggest lesson. Wow. There are a lot of,
maybe multiple,
lessons.
but
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the biggest lesson really came from before real estate, but
okay,
really translated itself through this. So for me, I think the attribute of humility is probably the most important characteristic or attribute a person can have, and especially in business. If you aren't willing to learn or you aren't willing to, admit when you've made a mistake, then you'll end up costing yourself so much.
right,
And so, you know, yeah, here I am, 35, starting a new career. I
right,
have, very little knowledge, and now I have to go and learn this whole new industry, basically.
right.
And it's very humbling. It really was. And so here I am, like, asking people younger than me and people who have, been doing less time, like, hey, how do you do this or whatever. But I was very optimistic because I had that kind of humility and was
Mhm.
able to, see my potential. And I think it's really what humility is not seeing, how little you are or how low you are or how whatever unqualified, but to see what your potential is and realize that really it's not me. Like I have, God-given talents and I need to utilize those to really thrive.
Exactly. And I think I love the fact that you brought up the word humility. It's interesting you even brought it up because I was just reading another book talking about it. I love C.S. Lewis, and I was reading. I think we all love the Chronicles or Narnia, but they don't realize like how many books I think as an
Right.
author that he wrote even back in the 1940s, and it's very applicable today. And it's called Screw Tape. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
It's pretty interesting. It's pretty much letters like the devil's writing to God, and how he destroys people. And I think people think of violence, but that's not at all what it talks about. But one of the things they talk about is anxiety, fear, depression, those types of things. Humility, making your ego inflated, right?
Yep,
Because, that could be very costly.
absolutely.
You're better off having humility in business. And that was like one of the chapters, which is interesting. You brought that up.
That's fascinating.
Um, yeah, very interesting. So, what podcast do you like to listen to? I'm wondering.
Well, I'll have to reveal the fact that I don't listen to very many
Oh,
podcasts.
okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, back
You
in
don't
the
have like
day,
a favorite that you are like, my go-to.
yeah, I mean, back in the day, I did listen to a lot of podcasts. I think like Gary Vee,
Yeah.
like I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy the profanity as much, but but the lessons I learned from him in terms of the marketing expertise,
Hmm.
and I've, read a bunch of his books, and
Okay.
I think that's probably one of the ones that stood out to me. In terms of real estate, if there was one, um, yeah, I mean there was a podcast back in the day called the Creative Real Estate Podcast, Adam Adams. It was actually one of the first podcasts that I was a guest on, but so like I had a little bias, like, oh, I like to listen. But he interviewed like every single episode was like a random. They were all different, like something about real estate that you never even like would think about. So Costing obviously was one, and I just learned about so many different niches within real estate that you can do. They're just overlooked. I had one guy talking about conversion easements, which was this really random topic like tax strategy, not so kosher necessarily, but still an interesting thing. You had another guy I remember talking about short-term rentals. And that was the first time I'd heard about, using, short-term rental arbitrage, right? I was like,
Mm,
wow, okay, that's something that, maybe I should look into, et cetera. So that was a cool podcast.
that does sound interesting. I was wondering too, like when with cost segregation, switching back to that and your clients, what's the ratio of commercial and residential clients that you work with?
I'd say it's pretty equal. I'd say maybe a little more commercial.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, probably like 60-40 in
Okay.
commercial, because we do, every industry from multifamily, self-storage, retail, office, industrial, but we do get a lot of residential, especially the short-term rentals, because there is a special rule within cost segregation that, and maybe we can, just touch on this a little bit because it's important to our listeners who may not be so
Yeah.
familiar, that really depreciation and cost seg, it's called a passive deduction, which means it can only be used to offset your passive income, which is considered real estate or rental income,
Hmm.
which means that if you have a W-2, unfortunately the cost seg, doing a cost seg is not really going to help you that much. Okay, it's a great strategy.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
a great strategy, but it's only going to be able to help offset your passive or your rental income, which, by the way, is great in and of itself, because if you have, even a single property or you're a passive investor, that money coming in is not going to be taxed, basically. So that's good on its own. However, if you are a real estate professional, either
Hmm.
you or your spouse, then
Hmm.
you have an exception that you can use depreciation to offset your active or your W-2 income. And so that's why cost seg becomes so powerful for people who are real estate professionals or their spouse is a real estate professional, because you can literally wipe out all your taxes whatsoever. Short-term rentals have the same rule for a different reason. It's not the real estate professional status rule. It's a different rule that allows you to have a short-term rental, self-manage it. That's an important part
Hmm.
of it.
Hmm.
And you can then use the depreciation to offset your W-2 income. So you can have a full-time job, have a short-term rental that you self-manage, and utilize the same benefit of the cost seg. So we get a ton of short-term rental owners, and so I'd say that's why I think the balance of residential to commercial is so high.
Hmm.
It's because of those short-term rental clients.
And their W-2s.
Most of them, yeah, and that's what's fascinating. And so I've seen quite a few people, invest in multiple short-term rentals and then actually retire from their W-2 because they're making more money after taxes from having a few rental properties
Wow.
than they were with their W. Yeah, it's crazy. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like if I'm making, let's say, making $300,000 a year, right? Pretty, a nice salary, but I'm paying, 30% in taxes.
Right.
That means I'm only making 200, right? Basically basic math, right? But if I now have 3 rental properties, and each one of those, let's say, is making $100,000 a year. Let's say it's bigger properties. So now I'm making 300,000, and if I do cost eggs, I'm not paying any taxes pretty much, and so
Mm-hmm.
therefore I'm making with those properties I'm making more money, and it's not being taxed, and it's very little work
Mm-hmm.
because to short-term rentals, once you set up, it's a lot of work to set them up, but once you set it up and you have systems in place, most of it's automated. You can get stuff automated, and you can basically work like an hour a week, and
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. So
It
yeah,
is crazy. So why don't you walk through, if someone called you, they had a short-term rental property that's residential. What's the first, and they've never done this. Like, how do you set them up to succeed in this?
sure. So the first thing we always like to do for any property, we run a free upfront analysis,
Okay.
an estimate of sorts, which will show you ahead of time how much it's going to cost, which is pretty minimal. Like I said, it's starting, a few thousand, $3,000 to $5,000 basically is our pretty normal pricing, and then how much you're going to save on your taxes.
Okay.
And so we can know ahead of time based on the purchase price, based on the square footage, based on other elements of the property, what the estimate of what that's going to look like. And we've done thousands of these, so we can know based on previous properties what it's going to look like. So that's the first step. Then we'll do, once we engage in the actual process, it's about a 3-week process from beginning
Okay.
to end. We will have one of our engineers go to the property, either
Mhm.
physically, or most of the time we actually do it remotely now, so through like a video call, and they just walk through. With the help of technology, it's gotten a lot simpler. We used to send our engineers on flights across the country, right, to go to every property. Nowadays, since the onset of COVID, we couldn't do that, so we transitioned.
Mhm.
And so we do a very detailed report, basically recording everything inside and out of the property and showing the different components and what schedule they depreciate on. Create
Mhm.
this detailed report, and then you just basically hand that off to your CPA. And so it's a pretty simple
Interesting.
process,
Yeah,
and
in
very
3
simple
weeks.
process.
And is that the same timing? So that was that I wanted to switch to, is commercial properties, as we know, can be a single triple net to 500,000 million square foot shopping center, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
obviously you have a formula. Those prices are all over the board. But I mean, let's just take like a 30,000 square foot shopping center. Like, how much does the cost seg cost for that?
Yeah, it will
For,
be pretty similar in terms of the pricing, and that's the amazing thing. The
it would be
cost.
3 to 5 grand, really?
So the 3,000 really, like on our residential, on our single family side. Once you get into commercial, it is going to be upwards around 5 or 6,000. It gets a little
Okay.
higher than that, but the
Okay.
truth of the matter is, it's not contingent on savings. It's not contingent on the purchase price whatsoever. So if you buy a 30,000 square foot shopping center, for
Hmm.
let's say $4 million,
Right.
and you buy a let's say a $40 million, right, shopping mall, right, a 300,000 square foot shopping mall, the price of the cost tag is going to be pretty similar. The savings are going to be obviously 10x, because it's usually a percent. The tax savings is usually a percentage of the purchase price. So if you get like 20 or 30% of the purchase price going into the accelerated cost segregation depreciation, right,
Hmm.
that's huge. That means like a $4 million property, you're going to be having like, let's say, $1 million like tax write off, right?
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Um, what are some, when you're advising investors as well, like, how do you balance, like, we already talked about what's possible. Okay. We,
Sure.
we just talked about the steps, but keeping them responsible too, right? And what red flags to look out for? Like, what are some no-nos, like, that they should not be doing?
What, in terms of the cost seg, or in terms of
Yeah, in
just
terms of the
investing in
cost
general?
seg. Yeah.
I mean, the cost seg there, it's pretty standardized, right? The IRS has rules. It's not this kind of outside method. It's all standardized from the IRS. They have something called the Cost Segregation Audit Techniques Guide, and
Hmm.
so if, as long as you have a company that's reputable, that is
Hmm.
following the rules, then there's really nothing to worry about. It does not raise a red flag. In fact, doing a cost egg is actually considered by the IRS the correct way to depreciate your property. Doing it where what most people do without the cost egg is just lumping everything together on a 39-year schedule, that's
Right.
actually considered the quote unquote the improper way to do it, because certain components should be on a 5 or 15-year schedule and not
Right.
that 39. But the IRS does not require you to do the cost seg because obviously it's money out of your pocket. You have to hire a third party to do it. But the real reason, what I heard from is a book, if anyone wants to check out, called Tax-Free Wealth by
Tax
Tom
free.
Wheelwright.
Okay.
He was the Rich Dad tax advisor. And what he says there in the chapter on depreciation is the government doesn't require the cost segregation because they know that due to the ignorance and or laziness of accountants, right, that it will just add more money to the treasury. So
Hmm.
they don't require the cost seg because they're not gonna, they're gonna say they're gonna get more money in taxes that way.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But it's
Funny, not
there.
funny, funny.
But it's there. And the point of that story is, and that anecdote in that book is it's there in the rule book. And
Yeah.
it's all about learning, using the tax code as a rule book and seeing what incentives are there and
Right.
using them. That's it.
Yeah. Interesting. So I was wondering with your work, because I know you have a big family. How are you balancing all the things that you're doing here?
Oh, I don't balance anything. Right. No, no,
All
it's
day
a
we can
wild
work
ride.
7 days, 24 hours a day.
Exactly. No, I have 6 kids.
Yeah.
Thank God, my oldest is 21,
Okay.
and my youngest is 11. So the ones that are still at home in school are
Still
they're
sufficient.
they're they're
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and they're pretty busy with school and extracurricular activities and things like that. But I love them. Love spending time with them. And weekends are really the main focal point, and I get to spend a little time with them in the morning as
Yeah.
well. And so it's I love it. So in terms of balance, it's really about just figuring out what works for you. I
Yeah.
thank God I have an amazing wife, and
Yeah.
she does a lot as well. Not as well. She does tons, and
Yeah.
much more than me.
Of course.
Much more than me. But yeah, I'm very, very grateful for that.
Are you traveling a lot or not as much now post COVID?
I do. I try to travel, quite a bit. I love the conferences. And really, that's the main reason why I travel. I don't, travel for pleasure too much
What are the
anymore.
conferences you love to attend?
So the CREI is one of my favorites. Actually, that was my
That's your
second
favorite.
one.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing event. I go to the
So
ICSC
that's one I went
usually.
to last year personally, because I was like
Yeah,
you, like in ICSC mode for 25 years, and
right.
I finally broke out of my shell last year and did CREI Summit because I just got started in social media a year and a half ago, and it's unbelievable.
I enjoy the smaller events much
Yeah,
more.
I
And
agree.
to the point where I actually started last year putting on my own events
Oh,
around the
I,
country.
let's
So
talk about it.
we've done to date, I think eight or nine different
Nice.
events around the country.
Hmm.
So we're trying to choose like locations where I have, a cluster of, more clients and things like that. So we've done in New Jersey, which, that's where our offices are based. So it's kind of a cluster there. We did Orange County. We actually did that like right timing at the same time as the CREI in Palm Springs. So I was there out in California
Right.
to do that. We did one in Denver, one in Dallas, Atlanta, and where else did we go? Forgetting, I'm missing something. But the point is, we're trying to go around the different locations. Oh, Charlotte was another place, and just different places where we have great community and putting a
Hmm.
small event together.
How many
And
people are
we've
usually?
had we've had between, I'd say, on the smaller end, I think maybe like 20 was one of the smaller ones, to up to about 60 people. So the
Nice.
trying to aim for about 40 to 50 people at each event, and just a great way to network. And that's really what it's all about. This business is all about networking. And so when you can have these smaller events where you can get a little more up close and personal with people, have those great conversations, that to me is really what it's all about. I mean, ICSC is awesome, right? But it's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, and you got to have everything lined up to go
Yes,
before you go.
exactly.
And not to say that you're not going to run into people and be networking, but it's intense. Or it sounds like yours are relaxed, you're
Much more.
accessible, people can speak with you that night, where are you hosting them at typically? Like offices or at restaurants or venues or?
We've been doing it at different venues. So we did, a couple of like Top Golf
Nice.
things
Okay.
where, yeah, it's kind of, we have our own, a few bays and we just kind of hang out. We have, some of them have like a adjacent room where
Okay.
we have a little talk or something like that. And actually a few of them we've done like panel discussions as well. So we've tried to combine that. Some other like smaller venues in Texas, we did this axe throwing place. That was fun.
Yeah.
But it's just like try to do kind of a smaller,
Hmm.
personalized venue where we can have a little fun, we can have food, and we
Right.
can hang out.
Are you advertising them on LinkedIn? Like, how would people know about them if they want to attend one?
I am, yeah. I try to push it through LinkedIn. Obviously, I have my email list of my clients, and I do kind of personalize it. Try to reach out to
Mhm.
the people who are in my network more,
Okay.
but everyone obviously it's networking. Everyone's open and invited. But yeah, definitely pushing it on the socials. So look out for the next ones. I think we're planning a couple more in probably April or May.
Okay.
So probably two or three more. Not sure the locations yet. They're still to be determined. I have a meeting this week to try to
Yeah.
finalize those, but keep your eyes
Nice.
out.
Awesome. Well, I've got three rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up. One, what's the one myth about real estate taxes you'd love to retire forever?
One myth. I'll bring this one related to cost seg. One myth is that depreciation recapture tax
Hmm.
is a nightmare.
Okay.
It's a myth. It's not that bad, and there are many strategies and methods that can be used to either defer, reduce, or completely eliminate depreciation recapture tax. So people hear about it like, oh,
Hmm.
cost seg is great, but that recapture ruins the whole thing. It's totally wrong. It's just not true.
Okay. What's the one habit that you see investors who win long term? What's their habit? What do they do? Other than calling you for cost segregation, what is it?
Winning long term is just integrity. I mean, I don't know if that's a characteristic or a habit per se, but it's honesty and just being open and straightforward. I've invested as a passive investor in a dozen different deals,
Okay.
and I've had a couple deals that didn't turn out the way that we had hoped, but the
Right.
transparency that I had you
Mm,
know
yeah.
through the general partners was great. And so I would, probably reinvest with them, even though the deal didn't go as hoped, but because of their integrity and, taking the blame for certain things that were out of their control. So it's like, things happen in real estate that's totally out of your control. But,
Absolutely.
are you planning for it? Are you taking responsibility for it? Are you informing your investors and keeping that open line of communication?
Right.
That to me is probably the biggest thing.
It's huge. It's huge because that's the way I used to shy away from investing because I got involved with two people I used to work for, and it's still a nightmare. No transparency, no monies, no one knows what's going on. It's crazy, but I like being an LP. I think it's great when you're with a great group, and it is what it is. um, what does success mean to you now versus a decade ago?
I think it's still very much the same because success to me never was material, meaning it's not like, do I need to reach a certain amount of money or do you need to reach a certain level of. To me, success is, and it's funny because I asked the same exact question at the end of my podcast to
Yeah,
all my
because people
guests.
change sometimes.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, they do, and it's a subjective answer, and I get different answers from everyone. But to me personally, it's about helping other people. It's about
Yeah.
how can I help other people. And I heard this from I think Allison Weiss,
Yeah.
a common friend of ours, that she gave me this acronym. I just want to give her credit for it, of hope. Hope is help one person every day.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can, to me, if I can help one person every single day, whether it be through, obviously the cost seg, that's an easy way to help people save taxes, but more so if it's making connections. And that's something I love to do, is just make, introductions and make connections through people, or just going out of way to, doing something for someone else, not
Right.
expecting anything in return. To me,
Absolutely.
that's what success is. And the more, money I have, the more, physically, monetarily successful I am, the more people I can help. So to me, that's really what it's all about.
And what are you doing on the outside? I'm sure you're involved in charities, and what do you like to put your your wealth in that's more charity based too.
Yeah, I have a lot of charities that I support. I'd love to support, local
Hmm.
community
Yeah,
people who,
too.
I had, like I mentioned earlier on the show, I had like a very, very serious like health crisis in our immediate family.
Yeah.
Thank God everyone's fine now, but it was a nightmare for me at the time, and I didn't have money. It wasn't covered by insurance. I went into major debt, and I was literally struggling to, I couldn't pay rent. I couldn't buy food. I was at that point I had not, and I was extremely strong. So I'd like to, proactively try to find people that I
Mhm.
know or people that, acquaintances or
Right.
things like that are in, similar situations. Life happens, there's a death in the family, there's a sickness, there's something that it's just out of control and you can't afford, certain things. If I can step in and try to do it as much as I can anonymously, where
Right.
they don't even know that it's me, but just, going in and giving them that cushion that they can get their feet on, breathe for a little bit. That's to me that makes such more important impact than some like organizations where you may not even know who's where it's going to. I saw a study
Right.
years ago. I was in the nonprofit when I was a teacher. I started a
Mhm.
nonprofit as well at that time. I since passed it on to someone else to manage it, but at that time I remember going into the nonprofit world and I saw a study
Mhm.
that was done about some of the top like 50
Yeah.
nonprofits in the U.S.
Yeah.
United Way and these big
Yeah, they're
names that
making
we
more
all
than
know
a
about.
they're a
Ronald
CEO.
McDonald Foundation, like the
Yeah.
CEOs are making seven figures and things like that. And it's like the money going to the charity. It was like 50% of the money is not even going to the efforts, right? So it's like what do who are you giving your money to exactly? Like what's the point? And so to me, more personalized that I know the money is going to help someone individually. That to me makes more impact.
I love that. I think that's great. I only support local charities here too in Cleveland, but then a gift that I do for my office is, I mean, we all have so much. For me, I have X amount of dollars I want to spend, giving to charities a year, and I have them pick which one they want, donations to go to, and most of them are local too.
That's great.
Yeah. You've having a really amazing story, and I just love I'll use your word humility that you have and such grace in everything that you do. And I love how you've brought because my family, my maternal side, my mom's side, they were teachers as well, and also wound up getting out of teaching going into business. And they do really make some of the best teachers out there, and not just to the people that they're in their office, but also to the people on, the public on the
Right.
outside, as well, and clients. Do you have any final words to say or that you want our guests to contemplate or think about that we haven't touched on that you think is important?
I'll leave you with one final thought, which
Yeah.
is it's similar to what you just spoke about the humility and about the teaching. Is that we have an old Jewish saying that who is a wise person is someone that learns from every single individual. Meaning, if you can learn from everyone, so, there's something to learn from everyone. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's you learn what not to do, or right, but sometimes and it takes real humility.
Mhm.
To be able to do that, to be able to, in every interaction, what can I learn from this? And how can I apply that to my life? And so listening to podcasts like this and continuing your education is really what's going to,
Huge.
boost your success, especially in real estate.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. I really enjoyed talking to you today, and just like the clarity, you have really grounded wisdom as well, that you brought to this whole entire conversation. And and again, like what really stood out too is you don't just talk, strategy. You also talk about stewardship too, because like you said, you're at ground zero during a very stressful,
Yeah.
family health crisis, but you're resilient and staying focused, staying forward, and you were blessed with a lot of success along the way and meeting the right people, and on top of it with your own business now. I mean, you're out there helping property owners unlock like massive savings, not having to work in corporate America, keep building their own family wealth. And you brought things back into integrity. You do everything that you've done is with intention and integrity, which is unfortunately it's rare. It's not what we always see, especially even in our industry. And I love that, doing the things the right way, building the right teams, making decisions that are aligned, not rushed, not fear based, not performative. So before we wrap up, I want to tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me on pretty much all the socials. I'm pretty active, but don't just hit that follow or connect button. Take 10 seconds. Let me know that you heard me on the Tori Nook Show. Write a little note. That's all it takes. And that's really, beginning of a conversation. So you can also go to yonahweiss.com, where you can find out about CostSeg, about our podcast, and everything else about me. And but happy to connect with everyone out there.
Awesome. And as always, I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of the Tori Nook Talk Show. You can catch all new episodes. They drop on Apple, Spotify every Tuesday. And if you enjoyed our conversation, please hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Leave a review, and I'd love to hear from you. So drop me a DM, email at tnook@anchorretail.com, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, Yonah.